In a gripping showdown, Representative Ted Lieu confronts FBI Director Kash Patel, demanding answers about the controversial Epstein files. The pressure mounts as Lieu forces Patel to address the explosive issue live, compelling the FBI to come clean on its handling of the infamous case. What hidden truths are the FBI trying to suppress? Watch as the truth unravels, and the stakes get higher than ever before. This is the moment that could change everything. Don't miss it. Representative Ted Lieu's questioning of FBI Director Kash Patel about how the FBI handled the Epstein case shines a light on some serious gaps in the investigation, especially regarding the evidence found at Epstein's mansion. The exchange starts when Lieu asks Patel about the FBI's search of Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan residence. Patel acknowledges that the search took place in 2019 and that the FBI found a safe inside the mansion. But when Lieu pushes further about what was inside the safe, Patel seems hesitant and unsure of the specifics. Lieu presses the issue by asking whether the FBI found "zero" in the safe, something that was widely reported in the media at the time. Patel doesn't provide a clear answer, only saying he would quote one. This leaves a significant question hanging. How could the director of the FBI not be certain about the details of such crucial evidence in one of the most high-profile investigations in recent history? At this point, Lieu brings up a specific news article from the New York Times from 2019, which reported that a collection of explicit photos was found in Epstein's safe. The article had detailed how these photos, linked to Epstein's criminal activities, were uncovered. Despite the widespread media coverage, Patel again avoids giving a direct answer, further fueling concerns that the FBI might not be fully aware of, or might be avoiding acknowledging, some key pieces of evidence in the case. Then, Lieu takes it a step further by showing a video clip of an interview with author Michael Wolff, who had extensive interactions with Epstein. Wolff recalls seeing a collection of photos in Epstein's safe, including disturbing images involving Donald Trump and young girls. These images, Wolff says, were displayed to him like playing cards. Lieu uses this information to challenge Patel, questioning whether the FBI had taken the time to speak with Wolff or to subpoena any tapes or interviews that could provide valuable insight into the case. What's troubling here is that Patel doesn't seem to know whether the FBI has made efforts to interview Wolff or subpoena relevant materials, such as the tapes of Epstein. Given the importance of Epstein's connections to powerful individuals, including Trump, Lieu's frustration is understandable. He insists that the FBI should be actively seeking out all possible leads and evidence, including interviewing key witnesses like Wolff and reviewing all available recordings of Epstein. Patel, however, simply states that he doesn't know if the FBI has pursued these avenues, leaving an unsettling sense of uncertainty about how thoroughly the investigation has been conducted. Lieu also challenges Patel on whether he's personally reviewed all the evidence in Epstein's files. Patel claims he's looked at everything investigators have provided, but this answer doesn't fully reassure Lieu. Given the gravity of the case and the potential for more explosive evidence, Lieu questions whether the FBI has done enough to investigate all available material. The failure to answer these basic questions about the evidence raises real concerns about whether the FBI is truly committed to fully uncovering what Epstein was involved in and who else might be implicated. At the core of this exchange is a larger issue, whether the FBI has done everything it could to follow up on every lead and make sure that all relevant evidence has been thoroughly examined. The lack of transparency about how the FBI is handling the Epstein case only fuels suspicions that certain powerful figures may be getting special treatment, or that key pieces of evidence are being overlooked or even suppressed. Lieu's questioning calls for a more aggressive approach to transparency, one that involves a clear public record of what the FBI has investigated, what materials it has accessed, and, importantly, what it has done to ensure that no stone has been left unturned in the pursuit of justice. When Representative Ted Lieu questioned FBI Director Kash Patel about Donald Trump's possible involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, the tension in the room was palpable. The Epstein case had already become one of the most talked about investigations, with connections to powerful individuals, and the public was eager for answers. Trump's relationship with Epstein had long been under the microscope, with media reports showing the two men together at various events over the years, and Lieu was determined to press Patel on this sensitive issue. The questioning begins with Lieu reminding Patel of the well-known photos showing Trump and Epstein together at various social gatherings. These images had been widely circulated, but Lieu wanted to go deeper and get answers on a more personal level. He specifically asks Patel if there are any photos in the FBI's possession that show Trump with young girls, images of uncertain age, as he put it. Patel's response is a hesitant and firm no, claiming that the FBI had never found any such images. Lieu, however, wasn't satisfied with that answer. He could not accept the simple dismissal of a question that had been on the minds of many for years. Lieu presses further, questioning how Patel could be so certain. After all, the connection between Trump and Epstein was not something that was easily dismissed. Epstein was known for running a sex trafficking ring that involved powerful individuals, and many of these figures were suspected of being involved in activities that they wanted to keep hidden. Lieu's line of questioning wasn't designed to accuse Trump directly, but rather to probe whether the FBI had conducted a thorough enough investigation into these allegations. After all, if there were any photos, any documentation that could implicate Trump or any other high-profile figures, wouldn't the FBI have a responsibility to examine that material carefully? Wouldn't they be obligated to pursue every lead to make sure nothing was overlooked? Patel, however, continued to defend the FBI's stance, suggesting that if there had been any material that could have implicated Trump, it would have been uncovered by multiple administrations and investigators over the years. According to Patel, the FBI's investigation had been thorough, and any such evidence would have come to light already. Lieu didn't buy this argument. He pointed out that no one had known about the creepy birthday message Trump had sent to Epstein until it was revealed in the Wall Street Journal, and that discovery had sparked more questions than answers. It was a striking example of how information had been hidden for years and how the powerful could avoid scrutiny while the public was left in the dark. Lieu's frustration was clear. He believed that the FBI was not being as transparent as it should have been, especially when it came to the most high-profile individuals linked to Epstein. He made it clear that the FBI had a responsibility to dig deeper, to investigate every possible lead, and to make sure no one was being shielded from accountability. The fact that the FBI had not subpoenaed Epstein's estate for all the materials they had gathered raised alarm bells for Lieu. It seemed to him like a missed opportunity, a failure to fully investigate every avenue that could lead to justice. Patel's explanation that Epstein's estate wasn't required to provide information, even under subpoena, only deepened Lieu's concerns. How could it be that one of the largest criminal cases in modern history was being limited by legal technicalities? The Epstein estate, which held an enormous amount of material, was still under no obligation to turn over those files. For Lieu, this was a serious flaw in the process. The estate may have been uncooperative, but that didn't mean the FBI couldn't take legal action to force them to hand over crucial evidence. Lieu was adamant that the FBI should have been more aggressive in securing this information, and Patel's failure to acknowledge this was a red flag. The questioning shifted back to Trump's involvement with Epstein. At this point, Lieu directly asks Patel about the possibility that Donald Trump could be on Epstein's quote 3. This was a question that had been circulating in the media for years, and many believed that Trump's ties to Epstein could be a key piece of the puzzle. But once again, Patel seemed evasive. He didn't answer the question directly, but instead pointed to the FBI's release of an index of names found in Epstein's files. Patel's response was vague, and Lieu picked up on the ambiguity, pushing harder for an answer. What made this exchange so crucial was that it exposed a significant gap in the investigation. The FBI had had years to gather information, to speak with witnesses, and to investigate the potential involvement of powerful figures like Trump. Yet, when pressed, Patel could not provide a definitive answer. The public was left wondering if the FBI had really done everything it could to uncover the truth. Had they questioned all the right people? Had they subpoenaed all the right materials? Had they followed up on every potential lead, no matter how sensitive or politically charged it might have been? Lieu's questions highlighted the fact that, despite the FBI's claims of transparency, There were still so many unanswered questions surrounding Trump's relationship with Epstein. The inability to provide clear answers on such an important issue only fueled the public's doubts about the integrity of the investigation. Lieu's questioning wasn't just about getting answers about Trump. It was about ensuring that the investigation into Epstein was comprehensive, fair, and thorough. The public had the right to know whether any powerful individuals had been involved in Epstein's criminal activities, and the FBI had a responsibility to pursue that investigation no matter where it led. The lack of transparency, the failure to answer simple questions, and the hesitation to take bold steps in seeking the truth all raised questions about how committed the FBI was to holding everyone accountable. In the end, Lieu's persistence revealed a deeper issue: the lack of political will to tackle the Epstein case with the seriousness and urgency it demanded. The investigation had been hampered by bureaucratic red tape, legal technicalities, and perhaps a reluctance to challenge powerful figures who might have had their own vested interests in keeping the truth hidden. The failure to answer questions about Trump's involvement wasn't just a matter of evasion, it was a symptom of a larger problem within the FBI's handling of the Epstein case. Until those gaps were addressed, until those questions were answered, it would be hard for the public to have confidence that justice was being fully served. The unanswered questions about Trump's involvement in the Epstein case continue to haunt the investigation, and Lieu's questioning made it clear that the FBI's work is far from finished. The public deserves to know the truth, and it's up to elected officials to demand that the FBI do everything in its power to uncover it. Until those questions are answered, the shadow of doubt will hang over the investigation, and the demand for full accountability will only grow stronger. When Representative Ted Lieu questioned FBI Director Kash Patel about the Epstein case, one of the key moments in their exchange was about the Epstein estate and its control over crucial evidence. The Epstein estate had become a significant roadblock in the investigation, holding a vast amount of material that could potentially shed light on Epstein's criminal activities and the powerful people involved in them. The issue raised was whether the FBI had been proactive enough in trying to access the materials held by the estate, and if not, why not? From the very start of the questioning, it was clear that Lieu was not buying Patel's explanation. The FBI director had acknowledged that the Epstein estate controlled a lot of the material related to Epstein's activities. But when Lieu asked about whether the FBI had attempted to subpoena this material, Patel seemed to stumble. The issue wasn't about whether the estate had the information, it was about whether the FBI had done everything in its power to retrieve it. The FBI had access to powerful legal tools, including subpoenas, to force the estate to provide documents, photographs, financial records, and other evidence. But Patel didn't seem to be in a hurry to use those tools. Lieu's frustration was palpable. The Epstein case had been one of the most talked about scandals in recent history, involving some of the most influential and powerful figures in the world, yet the FBI was acting as though it was helpless in retrieving the evidence it needed. For Lieu, this wasn't just a minor oversight. It was a failure to pursue every possible lead in one of the most important criminal investigations of the century. The Epstein estate wasn't just some regular entity. It was holding on to key information that could implicate high-profile individuals and expose the extent of Epstein's trafficking operation. Patel's defense was that the estate wasn't legally obligated to provide the information, even under a subpoena, which only raised more questions for Lieu. If the estate wasn't legally bound to comply with a subpoena, why hadn't the FBI challenged this in court? If there was resistance from the estate, why hadn't the FBI pushed harder to gain access to the documents and files it needed? There was an implication here that the FBI wasn't fully committed to getting to the bottom of the case, and that perhaps legal barriers were being used as an excuse not to act. For Lieu, the situation was unacceptable. He made it clear that the Epstein estate's unwillingness to cooperate should not be seen as a reason to give up on accessing critical evidence. The FBI had the power to take legal action. Subpoenas could be enforced by the courts. If the estate refused to cooperate, there were still ways to ensure the evidence was handed over. Lieu's argument was that the FBI should be doing everything in its power to get the evidence, no matter the legal hurdles they faced. This wasn't about a simple lack of cooperation, it was about the FBI's commitment to finding the truth. Patel's response that the estate wasn't under obligation to release the material was simply not good enough for Lieu. It was a clear deflection, and Lieu wasn't willing to let it slide. He asked whether the FBI had made any effort to subpoena the estate's files, and Patel responded with uncertainty. It became evident that the FBI had not aggressively pursued the estate's cooperation in the way that one would expect for such a high-profile case. Even worse, Patel's lack of knowledge about the status of any subpoenas or legal action only deepened the sense that the investigation wasn't being pursued with the urgency and thoroughness that it deserved. As Lieu continued pressing, it became apparent that the Epstein estate wasn't just holding on to minor documents or random pieces of evidence. This was the estate of a man who had trafficked young girls, had powerful connections, and had used his wealth and influence to avoid accountability for decades. The estate likely contained financial records, names of people involved in Epstein's operation, photographs, tapes, and potentially much more. The evidence the estate held could be the key to unlocking the full story of Epstein's criminal network, yet the FBI had not managed to forcefully retrieve it. Lieu's main point was that transparency in this investigation could not be achieved by simply accepting the fact that the estate wasn't cooperating. The public, the survivors, and the victims all deserved more than vague answers and evasions. The FBI needed to be more proactive and aggressive in seeking the estate's cooperation. If that wasn't happening, then the FBI needed to explain why. Lieu made it clear that voluntary cooperation wasn't enough when it came to the Epstein case. The stakes were too high for the FBI to sit back and hope the estate would play along. The public had the right to know why the estate hadn't been forced to turn over evidence, and the FBI had the legal tools to make that happen. At the core of this argument was a broader issue: the tension between bureaucracy and accountability. The FBI, as the leading investigative body in the U.S., was responsible for ensuring that every avenue of the investigation was fully explored. But when it came to Epstein's estate, the FBI seemed to be hampered by legal concerns that to Lieu seemed like convenient excuses. The estate wasn't some innocent party. It was holding on to materials that could expose the full extent of Epstein's network, and yet the FBI hadn't used the legal mechanisms at its disposal to secure those materials. For Lieu, the issue wasn't just about the FBI's failure to subpoena the estate. It was about the failure of institutions to take action when it was needed most. The case had already been delayed for years, and the survivors of Epstein's abuse had been waiting for justice for a long time. Lieu's frustration wasn't just with the estate's control over the evidence, but with the fact that the FBI hadn't fought harder to break that control and access the materials it needed to move the investigation forward. The Epstein estate's hold on crucial evidence became a symbol of the systemic failures in the investigation. Even though the FBI had the legal power to compel the estate to hand over key materials, it had not used those powers effectively. Instead, it seemed content to accept the estate's unwillingness to cooperate without pushing back. Lieu's line of questioning pointed out that this was not just a minor problem, it was a fundamental issue in the investigation, one that was preventing the full story of Epstein's crimes from coming to light. Ultimately, the Epstein estate's control over the evidence served as a barrier to justice. It was a reminder of how wealth, power, and influence can be used to obstruct truth and accountability, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. And it raised the question: if the FBI wasn't willing to take bold legal action to overcome these barriers, who would? The Epstein case was too important to let legal technicalities get in the way. The survivors, the victims, and the public deserved better, and Lieu's questioning made it clear that the FBI needed to do more to hold the estate and all those involved accountable. The estate's control over evidence was just one of many roadblocks, but it was a critical one, and Lieu wasn't going to let it go unanswered. During the exchange between Representative Ted Lieu and FBI Director Kash Patel, one of the most pressing issues that emerged was the need for true transparency and accountability in the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. From the very beginning of the questioning, Lieu's frustration was clear. He wasn't asking for vague reassurances or simple answers. He was demanding a full, honest account of what the FBI had done to investigate Epstein and the powerful figures involved in his crimes. The core of Lieu's argument was simple: the public, the survivors, and the victims of Epstein's trafficking ring had the right to know the truth. They had the right to see exactly how the investigation had been handled and whether every lead had been fully pursued. Unfortunately, the more Patel spoke, the more it became apparent that the FBI's handling of the case had been far from transparent. For Lieu, this wasn't just about the technicalities of the investigation. It was about ensuring that the truth came out, no matter who was involved. Lieu wasn't asking for sensationalized details or the release of sensitive information that could harm victims. Instead, he wanted transparency in a way that respected the survivors while also holding the powerful accountable. He wanted to know whether the FBI had subpoenaed critical evidence, whether it had interviewed key witnesses, and whether it had taken every necessary step to uncover the full extent of Epstein's network. But when Patel was asked about these basic questions, his responses were evasive or uncertain. At one point, Patel even admitted that he didn't know whether the FBI had subpoenaed crucial materials from Epstein's estate, further highlighting the lack of clarity surrounding the investigation. For Lieu, this lack of transparency was unacceptable. He understood that there were legal complexities involved, but he also knew that transparency wasn't just about following the letter of the law. It was about being open with the public and showing that the investigation was being conducted properly. Transparency meant providing the public with clear information about what had been seized in the investigation, what steps had been taken, and most importantly, what had been left unexplained. Without this transparency, it was impossible to know whether the FBI was truly doing everything it could to pursue justice. Accountability was just as crucial. Lieu made it clear that the FBI, as the leading investigative body, had a duty to hold all those involved in Epstein's crimes accountable, regardless of their status or power. If any powerful figures were involved, whether they were politicians, businessmen, or celebrities, they needed to be held to the same legal standards as anyone else. But accountability couldn't be built on vague assurances or political promises. It had to be built on solid evidence, clear records, and a thorough investigation. Lieu was asking for a clear inventory of the materials seized, a transparent record of what had been investigated, and a real explanation of why certain information was sealed or redacted. Only then could the public have confidence that the investigation was truly pursuing justice, not being hampered by political or institutional interests. Transparency also meant allowing the public to evaluate the thoroughness of the investigation. Lieu didn't ask for the release of the names of victims or other sensitive details. He wasn't trying to make the investigation sensational. What he asked for was a summary of the evidence, an inventory of what had been collected, and an explanation of why certain information couldn't be disclosed. This kind of transparency would allow the public to see whether the investigation was on the right track or whether it was being obstructed by legal technicalities or the powerful individuals involved. It would also allow survivors and advocates to ensure that their voices were being heard in the process. For Lieu, the bottom line was clear. If the FBI wanted the public to believe that it was seriously pursuing justice in the Epstein case,